So this is my Java 1 presentation by James Tosh. And so my idea, so my project was, well, like mainly like my experience with Java, like my classes with Java were inspired mainly by my previous experience with the coding language Python. So I've had past experience with it. And so like that's why I decided to learn Java. And the reason I chose this idea for the project, which was a survival-based game, was basically as a means to challenge myself by coding more of a simple game rather than like an algorithm or code to do a task like listing multiplication tables, that kind of thing. And what did I learn and use for my project? So like some key concepts I used uh, in my project were like control flow and like importing packages. So like the first one was control flow. And I basically used like while and for loops to keep track of the in-game hours and the in-game days. And like to make sure like while the players were still alive, then this code would run. And I also used if and else statements to account for all the multiple conditions. And based on like the player choices. So like the player could choose like, oh, I want to gather wood or I want to gather food. So like there's an if else statement, like if he wants to do this, then like go run that part. And the second one was importing packages. So I imported packages like random and scanner to receive user input and to allow events to occur randomly, like 2% chance, for example, throughout the gameplay. So like I use scanner to like receive user input. So like the user could type in like, oh, I want to gather in like wood, like for 4 hours, I want to gather wood. And like I used random, I used it so I could generate like a random integer between like 1 to 100. And if it fell between like if it was less than 2, if it fell between 1 and 2, that's 2% chance. Then like a rare event where like, for example, like monsters could destroy your campsite could happen. And my code example, the first one was the initialization of the code in which, and so that's basically the first like few lines. So basically I set up my few variables. Like I have food one, wood one. So that's the initial amount of the food for player one. And then food two, wood two for the initial amount of food and wood for player two. So this is like a two-player kind of game. And there were also many other variables like day counter, which counted the number of days. After like a certain days, like the players could receive perks, like they could gather more resources per hour. And then that's why you have like wood perk, food perk. After a few days, those get increased. And then we have the random events. So in the first photo, you could see like the java.util.random. And so like that was the imported package random. And so like after importing it, I used it for those random events. So the first few lines of code up there were like for the monster attack. So like if it was like 2% random range less than 2, then like, oh no, monsters destroyed your campsite, and then like your resources are reduced by half. And then if you find a boon of food while searching for resources, then like the chances for that 2%, it's similar. Like when it comes to like setting the probability of you finding it, similar to when you did it for the monsters attacking your campsite. So you have random to new random, that part. And then like if it fell under 2%, like if that 2% of this event happening was realized, then your food resources are multiplied by 2. You have twice as much food. And then demo, this is a live demonstration. My favorite part about working on this project was probably adding the two-player system, and in some ways also like adding the perks. Kind of gave me like insight on how more professional developers made like multiplayer two-player games, and also those abilities, like how like it also gave me some insight on how like developers could add like buffs or abilities for like characters and some sort of like RPG game, fighting game style. And so basically the first image is like the first few lines where I initialize the variables. and like showed how like food and resources were like for player one and for player two. And then the second image showed like the end results. Like at the end of the game, like maybe somebody dies, one of the players dies, so the other person wins. So how to improve my project? These were like things that I was hoping I could add, but in the end didn't. So like modularizing by adding methods. Basically, this means that I could have made my code simpler, like because it's all a bunch of like repetitive lines that all do similar things, especially since I have two players. So like I basically have two sets of almost the exact same code. And so what I could have done modularizing, meaning like I could have made like different functions, written different like functions or methods. Like for example, I could have written a method where I could have like made it so that it could collect resources. And the second one I could have added was more perks or difficulties. So like a hunger difficulty, like you could have you get hungrier, like as in like you your food resources go down even at night. Like originally you only consume food in the daytime, but like if you're hungry, then you also have to consume your food resources at night. And so what I could have done by adding more perks was basically add like flags, like if this perk is on, if this difficulty is on, then you run that part. And learning how to make a level system and to add different tools to use. Like it's similar to like the food and the wood perk that I added, except maybe more complex since like if you after certain days you can unlock different tools that can help you like gather, for example, it could help you gather resources at night. And like a level system also means like you could like after certain days you could like for example get an extra life. So like it's a wider scope of different things. And like all of these things are basically in some ways also like an insight on how like more professional developers like add buffs, abilities, leveling systems to characters. And I think that is it. Thank you for listening.
All right.